Lucas Montgomery III had the world served to him on a silver platter. Gulfstream jets, custom-tailored suits from Milan, and a last name that made velvet ropes drop before he even approached. But beneath the polished surface, he was a sinking ship, flunking every class, suffocating under the weight of expectations no one thought he could meet. Teachers wrote him off, classmates whispered behind his back, and his own father, the legendary tech mogul Harrison Montgomery, had all but erased him from the family legacy. Then, on a Tuesday that smelled like bleach and regret, a woman most people walked past without a glance, a black janitor named Evelyn Carter said 7 words that shattered his carefully constructed armor. He assumed she was there to scrub graffiti off lockers. He never expected she'd scrub the arrogance out of his soul. The Montgomery name was synonymous with power. Harrison's face graced Fortune magazine so often Lucas joked they should just print his birth certificate on the cover. Their penthouse in Manhattan had hosted senators and Grammy winners, yet the only thing echoing through its halls was Lucas's emptiness. At 17, he occupied a seat at Dalton Prep, New York's most exclusive high school, not because of his SAT scores, which were laughable, but because his father's donation could have funded a small country. The hallways lined with oil paintings of Ivy League-bound alumni knew Lucas for 3 things: his smirk, his $5,000 sneakers, and his talent for turning A-plus opportunities into FE realities. Teachers passed him like a hot potato, terrified of losing Montgomery Foundation grants. When the dean pulled him in for a come-to-Jesus meeting about his grades, Lucas kicked his feet onto the desk and drawled, "My trust fund earns more in a minute than you make in a year. What's the point of algebra again?" The quote went viral on prep school confessions, but no one dared challenge him. Even the principal wore a tight smile when he strutted past. Home was no refuge. Harrison Montgomery was a glacier in a Brioni suit. "You're a liability," he spat one evening after another disciplinary email. "If you were an intern at my company, HR would have fired you before lunch." Lucas rolled his eyes, twirling his car keys, a matte black Ferrari, a consolation prize for getting expelled from Swiss boarding school. "Good thing I'm not an intern," he shot back. Harrison's silence was colder than the Arctic. "The world doesn't give a damn about your last name if you're useless beneath it." The words hung like a guillotine. The next morning, Lucas swerved into the staff parking lot, blasting Drake loud enough to rattle the windows. Students gawked, some with envy, most with disdain. But one pair of eyes didn't flinch. Evelyn Carter, the janitor who'd been cleaning Dalton's hall since before Lucas was born, stopped mopping and stared him down like he was a stain she couldn't wait to erase. "You lost, rich boy?" she asked, voice dripping with something sharper than sarcasm. Lucas froze. No one talked to him like that, not even his father. "This ain't your playground," she continued, wringing out her mop with hands that had seen more struggle than he'd ever known. "That chip on your shoulder, it's made of the same glass as these windows. And honey glass always breaks." For the first time in his life, Lucas had nothing to say. The air smelled like pine cleaner and humility. Somewhere in the distance a bell rang, but for Lucas it sounded an awful lot like an alarm. Lucas barely recognized himself anymore. The crisp designer jackets had been replaced with a thrift store hoodie, the swagger reduced to a defeated shuffle. Evelyn's words clung to him like a shadow. "Glass always breaks." He'd laughed it off, but now, as he boarded the yellow school bus, his Ferrari long gone, he felt the first cracks spreading. The school hallway smelled of industrial cleaner and judgment. Kids who used to trip over themselves to laugh at his jokes now whispered as he passed, "That's the Montgomery kid. Looks like he got demoted to peasant." Lucas clenched his fists but kept walking. Then he saw it a slur scrawled in red marker across his locker. Not just any insult. A racial epithet, sharp and ugly. His stomach dropped. But when he turned, he caught Evelyn's gaze. She was staring at the word, her jaw tight, mop gripped like a weapon. For a heartbeat, he thought she'd scrub it away. Instead, she stepped back. "You clean it," she said, voice low. "See how it feels when hate's staring you in the face." The envelope from his literature test burned in his pocket. 18,100. The teacher's note, "Did you even read the passage?" felt like a punch. But worse was the biology exam, a 0 circled in blood-red ink. The counselor's office was all sterile light and pity. "You're not just failing, Lucas. You're drowning." He wanted to snap back, but the words died in his throat. 3 tutors had quit. His father hadn't answered his calls in weeks. That afternoon, he found Evelyn in the empty cafeteria, her hands deep in a bucket of soapy water. "You were a teacher," he said, voice raw. "Why'd you stop?" She didn't look up. "Same reason most black women with degrees end up mopping floors. Systems rigged. Got accessed when budgets got cut last and first out. Funny how that works." The bitterness in her laugh made him flinch. "So, you're just giving up?" he challenged. Evelyn slammed the mop down. Water sloshed over his sneakers. "Boy, you got a whole empire handed to you and still managed to fail upwards. Don't talk to me about giving up." The air between them crackled. Lucas opened his mouth, then shut it. For the first time, he saw the fire behind her quiet demeanor. "You want help," she said. "Then meet me here tomorrow at 5 a.m. and bring your damn books. Dawn came too soon." The school was a ghost town, the halls echoing with every step. Evelyn was already there, a stack of worn textbooks on the table. "Rule 1, she said, pushing a tattered copy of To Kill a Mockingbird toward him. "You read this, all of it. Then you tell me why a janitor understands it better than a Montgomery." Outside, the first bell rang. Somewhere in the distance, a group of students laughed. Lucas flipped open the book and realized with a sinking dread that he'd never actually finished it. The pages smelled like dust and second chances. Lucas's knuckles turned white around his pencil. Josh's sneer echoed in the empty cafeteria, bouncing off the tile like a dare. "What's the matter? Montgomery Daddy cut you off, so now you're slumming it with the help." The other boy snickered, kicking a chair toward Lucas. It screeched across the floor, stopping just inches from his foot. Evelyn didn't look up from stacking trays. "Ignore them," she said, voice steady. But Lucas could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers pressed just a little too hard against the metal. Or what? Josh stepped closer, looming over the table where Lucas sat. "Gonna cry to your maid." Something snapped. Lucas stood so fast, his chair clattered to the ground. "Her name," he said, voice shaking, "is Dr. Wallace." The room went dead silent. Josh blinked, then burst out laughing. "Oh, this is rich. You giving me a lecture on respect?" He shoved Lucas's notebook off the table. Pages fluttered to the floor, covered in messy, earnest handwriting, weeks of work scattered like trash. Evelyn moved then. Not toward the boys, but to the notebook. She knelt, gathering the pages with deliberate care. When she stood, her eyes locked onto Josh's. "You ever wonder why they call it football when you mostly use your hands?" she asked, voice sweet as poison. "Or is thinking too hard for you, too?" Josh's face darkened. "You don't know who you're talking to, lady." "Oh, I know." Evelyn smoothed a crumpled page between her fingers. "You're the kind of boy who peaks at 18. And Lucas," she handed him the notebook, "he's the kind who's just getting started." The bell rang. Josh muttered something ugly under his breath and stalked away, but the victory felt hollow. Lucas stared at the notebook, his throat tight. "Why'd you do that?" Evelyn sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "Because you finally stood up for something that wasn't yourself." She nodded at the notebook. "Now pick up your pencil. We've got work to do." The next morning, Lucas arrived even earlier. The school was still dark, the halls hushed. Evelyn wasn't at their usual spot. Instead, he found a note taped to the cafeteria door, East Stairwell. Bring your courage. When he pushed open the door, he froze. Evelyn stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed. Beneath her, spread across every step, were books, dozens of them. Dog-eared paperbacks, hardcovers with cracked spines, even a few handwritten journals. "What's this?" Lucas asked. "Your new curriculum," she said. Every one of these was written by someone the world tried to silence. Women, black folks, immigrants, people like me. She kicked a battered copy of The Fire Next Time toward him. "You want to learn, start here. These are the voices they don't teach you about in that fancy classroom." Lucas bent to pick up the book. The cover was warm from the rising sun. Somewhere in the distance, a janitor's cart rattled down the hall. For the first time in his life, Lucas Reed Montgomery III felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The video went viral by lunchtime. Lucas could feel the stares burning into his back as he walked through the halls, some curious, most mocking. But it wasn't until he turned the corner and saw the crowd gathered outside the janitor's closet that his blood ran cold. Someone had spray-painted Montgomery's new tutor in jagged red letters across the door, an arrow pointing to a crude caricature of Evelyn scrubbing floors. Beneath it, the words, "Know your place." Lucas's hands shook. He lunged forward, tearing down the paper taped to the door, but the damage was done. The laughter around him was a physical thing, sharp as broken glass. Then he heard Evelyn's voice behind him, calm but edged with steel. "Leave it." He turned. She stood there, bucket in hand, her posture unbroken. "They want a reaction," she said so quiet only he could hear. "Don't give them one." But Lucas had spent a lifetime reacting. "This isn't right," he hissed. Evelyn's gaze flickered to the crowd, then back to him. "Right doesn't live here, Lucas. But you already knew that." She stepped past him, unlocked the closet, and began refilling her mop bucket as if nothing had happened. The laughter died awkwardly. That afternoon, Lucas found his locker vandalized again, this time with the word "traitor" in black marker. He didn't bother cleaning it off. Instead, he grabbed his copy of Between the World and Me, a book Evelyn had given him, and headed to the library. But Josh and his friends were waiting. "Look who's finally reading," Josh sneered, blocking the aisle. "Too bad it's trash." He snatched the book from Lucas's hands and tossed it to his friend, who flipped through the pages with exaggerated disgust. "What's next? You gonna start quoting MLK at us?" Lucas clenched his fists. "Give it back." Or what Josh grinned. "You'll call your maid to save you." Something inside Lucas snapped. He didn't swing, didn't shout. Instead, he stepped closer, voice low. "You know why you're scared of me now, Josh, because I'm not afraid of you anymore, and that's all you've ever had fear." He held out his hand. The book. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Josh's grin faltered. He threw the book at Lucas's chest. "Whatever. Enjoy your pity party." Lucas picked the book up off the floor, smoothing the crumpled pages. When he looked up, Evelyn was standing in the library doorway watching. She didn't smile, didn't nod, but her eyes held something he'd never seen before: respect. That night, Lucas's phone buzzed with a final text from his father. "Last chance. Cut ties with that woman or lose your inheritance." He stared at the screen, then typed a single reply. "I already lost the only thing that mattered, myself. Evelyn helped me find him." He hit send. The response was immediate. "Then you're dead to me." Lucas exhaled long and slow. For the first time in his life, the weight of his name was gone. He grabbed his notebook and began to write. The essay Lucas had posted on the reading board reappeared 3 days later, torn at the edges, but taped back together by an anonymous hand. Beneath his signature, someone had scribbled in pencil, "Keep writing. We're listening." The coffee ritual became sacred. Every Monday, Lucas brought 2 cups black for Evelyn, sickeningly sweet for himself. They'd sit on the janitor's supply cart like it was a seminar table discussing Baldwin's fire or Morrison's ghosts while the first bell loomed. But today, Evelyn slid a battered hardcover across the cart. "James Cone," she said. "The Cross and the Lynching Tree." Lucas ran his thumb over the cover. "This isn't on any syllabus." "It's on mine," Evelyn replied. "You wanted the real thing. This is it." The backlash came in whispers first. A teacher accidentally bumped into Lucas's desk, sending his copy of The Fire Next Time skidding across the floor. The football team started calling their practice drills Montgomery Moments code for any play that ended in failure. But the real blow came when Principal Calloway summoned Evelyn to his office. Lucas only knew because he saw her walking out spine straight, but hands trembling. He caught her in the stairwell. "What happened?" Evelyn's laugh was hollow. "Apparently, unauthorized tutoring violates my contract. They're reassigning me to night shifts." She met his eyes. "Effective immediately." Lucas's stomach dropped. "Because of me. Because the system works exactly how it's designed to," she corrected. "You don't upset the hierarchy. Not without consequences." She handed him a key. "Storage room B12. I left you some books." Oh, that night Lucas broke into the school. The storage room was damp and smelled of mildew, but the cardboard box in the corner gleamed like treasure. Inside, every book Evelyn had ever taught from margins filled with her tight, precise notes. At the bottom lay a manila envelope. Lucas's breath caught when he opened it, pages and pages of Evelyn's unpublished manuscript, Invisible Classrooms When the Academy Fails Its Own. A noise echoed down the hall. Lucas froze, heart-hammering. Footsteps. Then a flashlight beam cut through the dark. "Read." It was Miss Alvarez, the young history teacher. She lowered her flashlight, taking in the open box, the manuscript in Lucas's hands. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a key. "Room 217, she said quietly. "It's empty after 3 p.m. The lock still works." Lucas stared at her. "Why are you—" "Because I was Evelyn's TA at Chicago," she interrupted, "and no one should have to choose between a paycheck and their purpose." The manuscript suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. Lucas looked down at Evelyn's words, then back at Alvarez. "This isn't over," he said. Alvarez smiled grimly. "It's just beginning." Outside, the first drops of a storm began to fall. The secret classroom grew like wildfire in the shadows. What began with Lucas and Priya soon became 12 students huddled in the abandoned library every Tuesday and Thursday, their faces illuminated by the glow of a single flickering fluorescent light. They called themselves the Underground Syllabus, a joke at first, then a badge of honor. Evelyn arrived one evening to find the door propped open with a fire extinguisher, the scent of marker fumes thick in the air. Someone had turned the entire back wall into a mural, quotes from Baldwin Angelo and Du Bois painted in jagged, urgent strokes. Beneath them in fresh black letters, "Education is rebellion." Priya stood on a chair adding the final flourish. She turned marker still in hand and froze when she saw Evelyn. "We can clean it." "No," Evelyn said, voice rough. "Leave it." The hammer fell on a Thursday. Principal Calloway stormed into the library flanked by 2 security guards, his face purple with rage. "This is vandalism, unauthorized assembly. Do you have any idea the liability—" Lucas stepped forward. "We're just studying, sir." With her, Calloway jabbed a finger at Evelyn. "She's a janitor, not a faculty member." The room went still. Then Priya spoke quiet but clear. "She's the only one who actually teaches us how to think." Calloway's eyes bulged. "You're all suspended, and you—" He whirled on Evelyn. "You're fired." A gasp rippled through the room. Lucas felt the air leave his lungs. But Evelyn simply untied her work apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table. "Funny," she said. "I quit 10 minutes ago." She reached into her bag and slid a stack of envelopes across the table, college recommendation letters, one for each student, signed Dr. Evelyn Wallace, former professor of literature. The protest began at dawn. By first bell, 30 students sat cross-legged in the main hallway, the souls of black folk open on their laps. Priya had made signs, "Who's really cleaning this school?" and "Knowledge has no job description." Lucas stood at the center, Evelyn's blue-bound book in his hands. Reporters clustered at the doors. Calloway screamed into his phone. And then, a black town car pulled into the Circle Drive. Charles Montgomery stepped out. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Lucas braced for the blowout, the humiliation, the "you're dead to me" made public. But his father walked past him without a word, straight to Evelyn. "Dr. Wallace," Charles said, extending a hand, "I believe we have some things to discuss." Evelyn didn't take it. "Do we?" Charles dropped his voice. "My son wrote something. About you. About all this." He pulled a folded newspaper from his briefcase, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. There, on the op-ed page, was Lucas's article, "What My Janitor Taught Me About Power." Charles's jaw tightened. "I'd like to apologize and offer my support." Evelyn studied him. "What kind of support?" "A school," Charles said. "One where you decide what's on the syllabus." The hallway erupted. Lucas stared at his father, then at Evelyn. Her eyes glistened, but her voice was steady when she said, "We'll start with Du Bois, then we'll see." Outside, the first light of morning broke through the fog. The assistant principal's office smelled like cheap coffee and stale authority. Evelyn kept her hands folded on the desk, her posture calm but unyielding. "With all due respect," she said, her voice steady as a metronome, "when exactly did teaching become a fireable offense?" The assistant principal, a balding man with a perpetually sweating upper lip, leaned forward. "You're a custodian, Ms. Wallace. This is about boundaries." Evelyn didn't blink. "Funny. I don't recall boundaries when I cleaned vomit from your office after last year's holiday party, or when I stayed late to unlock classrooms for your unpaid overtime meetings." Across the hall, Lucas pressed his ear to the door, his stomach churning. Priya tugged his sleeve. "We have to do something." The next morning, the school awoke to a spectacle. Every locker in the senior wing had been papered with photocopies, Lucas's op-ed, Evelyn's unpublished manuscript pages, and a single highlighted line from Du Bois, "Education is that whole system of human training within and without the schoolhouse walls." But the real shock came at assembly. When Principal Calloway took the podium to announce new disciplinary measures, the microphone cut out. Then, from the back of the auditorium, a voice rang out, clear, sharp, and trembling with purpose. "I have something to say." Lucas stood in the center aisle, Evelyn's blue-bound book raised above his head like a torch. The faculty moved to stop him, but then Priya stood. Then Marcus from the basketball team. Then Jamal, whose IEP meetings no one attended. Soon, 24 students were on their feet, their silence louder than any protest chant. Calloway's face turned the color of raw steak. "Sit down, Montgomery." "No." Lucas climbed onto the stage. "Not until you answer one question. Why is it okay for a janitor to clean our messes, but not clean up this?" He gestured to the outdated history textbooks stacked nearby, the ones that still called the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression. The room erupted. Teachers reached for phones. A reporter who'd slipped in with the PTA parents started live streaming. And in the very last row, Charles Montgomery watched his son, really watched him for the first time in 18 years. Evelyn was mopping the science wing when the news came. "They reinstated you," Lucas burst in, breathless. As a teacher, Calloway just announced it to the press. Evelyn wrung out her mop slowly, the water swirling gray with dirt. "I know." Lucas froze. "You knew?" She hung the mop on its hook with finality. "Told you learning was messy." A ghost of a smile played at her lips. "Now go write about it. And this time, mean every word." Outside, the first bell rang. But for once, Lucas didn't hurry to class. He walked slowly, deliberately to the abandoned library where a dozen students already waited, their notebooks open, their pens poised. The revolution, it seemed, had just begun. The night before the speech contest, Lucas sat in his empty bedroom, now stripped of its designer furniture, with Evelyn's blue-bound book open on his lap. The pages smelled like coffee and pencil shavings. He traced her margin notes with his finger, the ones that said, "Truth isn't pretty, it's necessary," and "They'll call you angry when what you really are is awake." A knock came at his door. His father stood there, tie loosened, holding Lucas's discarded essay. "You really believe this?" Charles asked, voice unreadable. Lucas didn't look up. "Every word." Ugh. The auditorium buzzed with nervous energy. Priya gripped Lucas's arm as they took their seats. "They're all here," she whispered. The panel of judges included the superintendent, 2 college admissions officers, and Lucas's stomach dropped, his father sitting stiffly in the front row. One by one, students delivered polished speeches about perseverance and GPAs. Then the principal announced Lucas Montgomery. A hush fell. Lucas walked to the podium, his sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. He placed no notes on the lectern. Just Evelyn's book. What does it mean to win in life? His voice cracked, then steadied. 3 months ago I'd have said money, power, a last name that makes doors open. Then I met a woman who taught me that real winning isn't about what you take, it's about what you give back. A teacher coughed. Someone's phone rang. Her name is Dr. Evelyn Wallace. She was a tenured professor before she was fired for exposing corruption. She mopped our floors while we ignored her. And she's the reason any of us actually learned anything this year. Charles's face darkened. The superintendent leaned forward. Lucas held up the book. This was hers. In the margins, she wrote, "Education isn't a ladder to climb, it's a light to pass. So here's the truth no one wants to hear. We don't win when we chase grades. We win when we chase justice, when we see the janitors, the lunch ladies, the people this system treats like ghosts." The silence was volcanic. Then, clapping, slow, deliberate. Charles Montgomery stood, his polished shoes echoing as he walked toward the stage. The room held its breath. "You forgot your closing statement," Charles said, voice rough. He placed a business card on the lectern. "Dr. Wallace's new office address. She starts Monday." The card read, "Montgomery Educational Initiatives, Director of Curriculum." As the room erupted, Lucas saw her Evelyn standing in the back doorway, her janitor's keys still on her belt, her eyes bright with something that looked an awful lot like pride. The morning after the speech, Lucas arrived at school to find the hallway outside the principal's office swarming with news vans. A reporter shoved a mic in his face. "Lucas, how does it feel knowing your speech went viral?" He pushed past the mice, scanning the crowd for Evelyn. Instead, he found Principal Calloway, pale and sweating, holding a press release. After review, the board has decided to reinstate Dr. Wallace as a guest lecturer. The students erupted. Priya whooped, pumping her fist, but Lucas barely heard. His phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "Check the janitor's closet." The closet door was ajar. Inside, Evelyn's mop leaned against the wall, but her bucket was gone. In its place sat a stack of brand-new books, "The Fire Next Time Between the World and Me," "The Souls of Black Folk," each with a post-it note. "For the next kid who needs them more than I do." Beneath them lay a single key and an address scribbled on a napkin. 217 Magnolia St. Ursuade A.M., bring coffee. The house was small but bright, its porch lined with potted herbs. Evelyn answered the door in jeans and a faded University of Chicago sweatshirt, holding 2 mugs. "You're late," she said, but her eyes crinkled at the corners. Lucas held up the viral news article on his phone. Fired janitor hired as consultant for state education reform. "You knew this would happen," he accused. Evelyn sipped her coffee. "I knew you would happen." She nodded to the living room where boxes of books waited. "Your father's funding a pilot program. We start Monday. You didn't think I'd let you off that easy, did you?" She tossed him a stack of student essays, his new tutoring roster. "Turns out revolutions need heirs too." Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. Somewhere in the distance, a school bell rang. But for the first time in his life, Lucas wasn't rushing to answer it. He was exactly where he was meant to be. The Evelyn Institute's walls were covered in student artwork portraits of Baldwin Morrison and Du Bois, splashed in vibrant colors. On the second anniversary of its opening, Lucas stood by the window watching a group of teens debate passionately in the courtyard. One girl, no older than 13, slammed her notebook shut and declared, "Y'all ain't ready for this truth bomb." The room erupted in laughter and groans. Evelyn appeared beside him, handing over a steaming mug. "Sounds familiar." Lucas grinned. "She's got your timing." That night at the National Awards ceremony, the camera lights were blinding. Lucas adjusted his tie, a gift from Evelyn embroidered with tiny open books along the seam. The audience hushed as he stepped to the podium. "They told me education was about climbing ladders," he began, voice steady. "But Dr. Wallace taught me it's about building bridges." The screen behind him lit up with photos Evelyn kneeling beside a student at a graffiti-covered study table. Lucas high-fiving a kid who'd just read his first whole book. The Institute's Wall of Voices, where every learner left a handwritten quote that moved them. "2 years ago, a janitor's key unlocked my future," Lucas continued. "Now we've made 10,000 copies." He held up a keyring, each key tagged with a student's name. Because real change doesn't come from fancy degrees. It comes from seeing the invisible people and realizing they've been the teachers all along. The applause thundered. But Lucas was already looking past the lights to where Evelyn sat in the front row, her headscarf bright purple against the sea of suits. She wasn't clapping, just nodding once like she'd known this moment would come all along. Backstage, a reporter asked the question. Everyone wondered, what's next for the boy who traded $1 billion inheritance for a community center? Lucas glanced at Evelyn, who raised an eyebrow. "We're expanding," he said. 3 new cities next year. And he pulled a worn blue book from his bag, The Souls of Black Folk. Its margins now filled with 2 generations of notes. "We're starting a library for the kids who don't just want to read books, they want to talk back to them." Evelyn smiled, then wide and unguarded. "Told you, learning was contagious." Outside, the moon hung low over the city. Somewhere, a janitor was mopping a school hallway. Somewhere, a kid was scribbling in a notebook they'd never show their teacher. And in a quiet corner of Atlanta, a light stayed on late at the Evelyn Institute, waiting for whoever needed it next.